There is a strange moment that happens to a lot of people. It usually comes quietly. Maybe you're lying in bed at night scrolling through your phone. You see someone your age buying a house. Someone else is getting married. A former classmate has built a successful business. Another person seems to have found their purpose, their career, their place in the world. And then, almost without realizing it, you look at your own life and a thought appears. What am I doing wrong? Maybe you thought you would have more figured out by now. Maybe you thought that by this age, you would know who you are. You would have a career, a direction, more money, a relationship, a plan. Instead, you still have questions. And the longer those questions remain unanswered, the more frightening they become. Because eventually, uncertainty starts to feel like failure. You begin to believe that everyone else received some kind of map, and somehow yours never arrived. But what if that isn't true? What if you are not behind? What if you have spent years comparing your life to a timeline that was never meant to be yours? From the moment we are young, we are taught that life moves forward in a certain order. First, you learn. Then you choose a path. Then you build a career. Then you become successful. Then you find the right person. Then finally, you can look at your life and say, I made it. And when your life doesn't follow that order, something inside you starts to panic. You begin asking questions like, shouldn't I be further ahead by now? Did I waste too much time? Did I make the wrong choices? Did I miss my chance? But there is a problem with this invisible clock. No one can tell you exactly who created it. There is no universal age when you are supposed to understand your life. No age when you must have found your purpose. No age when you are required to become successful. And yet, millions of people wake up every day feeling like they are late. Late to success, late to love, late to life itself. And perhaps the cruelest part is this. Sometimes your life does not even have to be bad for you to feel like a failure. All it takes is seeing someone else's life. Imagine two people. One discovers what they want to do at 20. They spend the next 10 years becoming better at it. By 30, everyone around them sees the result, the success, the confidence, the certainty. Now imagine someone else. At 20, they have no idea who they are. They choose the wrong career. They enter relationships that don't last. They lose years trying to become someone they were never meant to be. From the outside, the second person looks behind. But what if those years were not empty? What if the things that seemed like mistakes were teaching them something they could not have learned any other way? There are lessons you cannot understand until you have lived through them. Sometimes you have to choose the wrong path before you understand what the right one feels like. Sometimes you have to lose something before you understand what actually mattered to you. Sometimes you have to become exhausted trying to be someone else before you finally ask, who am I when I stop trying to impress everyone? But when we compare our lives, we rarely see any of this. We only see the destination. We see someone standing on a mountain and forget that they had to climb it. And worse, we assume that because they reached their mountain first, we must be walking in the wrong direction. In Hindu philosophy, there is a powerful idea known as dharma. Dharma is often translated as duty, purpose, or the right way of living. But perhaps one of the most important things about dharma is that it is not identical for everyone. Your path is not supposed to be a copy of someone else's. What is right for one person may not be right for another. And this creates a problem for comparison. Because comparison assumes that everyone is participating in the same race, the same starting line, the same finish line, the same rules. But what if there was never one race to begin with? In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna faces a moment of complete confusion. He is standing in the middle of a crisis, unable to see clearly. He questions what he should do. He doubts himself. He wants to escape from the situation entirely. And Krishna does not give him a simple answer that makes every uncertainty disappear. Instead, Arjuna is guided toward understanding his own duty and his own path, not someone else's, his. And perhaps that is something many of us forget. We spend so much time asking, how far ahead are they? That we stop asking, where am I actually going? Nobody enjoys feeling lost. We want answers. We want certainty. We want someone to tell us exactly what we should do next. But sometimes, feeling lost is what happens when the version of you that once knew where it was going no longer exists. Maybe the dream you had at 20 is no longer your dream. Maybe the person you were trying to become was never really you. Maybe the path you spent years following no longer makes sense, and that can feel terrifying. Because before you find a new direction, you often have to lose the old one. There is a space between who you were and who you are becoming, and from the inside, that space can feel like being completely lost. But it may not be. You may simply be in a part of your life where the old answers no longer work, and the new ones have not arrived yet. That is uncomfortable. But uncomfortable does not always mean wrong. A question without an answer is not proof that you have failed. Sometimes it is simply proof that you have reached a question you have never been brave enough to ask before. Perhaps one of the most painful thoughts a person can have is, I wasted so many years. Maybe you stayed in the wrong relationship. Maybe you spent years in a job you hated. Maybe fear stopped you from trying something. Maybe you watched other people move forward while you remained in the same place. And now you look back and wish you could take it all back. But here is something worth considering. You cannot judge the meaning of a chapter while you are still living the story. There are experiences that only reveal their meaning later. A painful relationship may teach you what you will never accept again. A terrible job may reveal what kind of life you actually want. A failure may destroy an identity you had built your entire life around. And that destruction may eventually make room for something more honest. This does not mean that everything happens for a reason, and it does not mean every painful experience was necessary. Some things simply hurt. Some years genuinely feel difficult to understand. But even then, your past does not have to become a prison. You cannot return and change the person you were, but you can stop allowing that person to decide who you are allowed to become. When people hear the word karma, they often imagine a system of immediate rewards and punishments. Do something good, receive something good. Do something bad, be punished. But life rarely feels that simple. Good people struggle. Dishonest people sometimes succeed, and sometimes the people who seem the most lost eventually discover a path that changes everything. The deeper idea of karma is connected to action and consequence. What we do matters. The choices we make shape our lives, but this does not mean your entire future has already been permanently decided by your past. If it were, change would be impossible. Every day, you are still acting, still choosing, still creating consequences. You are not only the person who made mistakes 5 years ago. You are also the person standing here now, capable of making a different choice. And perhaps that is what makes the idea of karma less frightening than people imagine. Your past matters, but so does what you do next. This may be the hardest part to accept. You do not need to catch up with everyone, because you are not living behind them. You are living your own life. Think about how much anxiety comes from the idea of catching up. You need to earn more because someone else already does. You need to find love because everyone else seems to have found it. You need to become successful because someone younger than you already is. But catch up to what? To whose definition of success? To whose relationship? To whose dream? Sometimes we chase things not because we truly want them, but because we are terrified of what it means if everyone else has them and we don't. And before we know it, we are running as fast as we can toward a life we never actually chose. Maybe slowing down is not falling behind. Maybe it is the first time you have stopped long enough to ask where you are going. There is enormous pressure to understand everything, to know your 5-year plan, to know your purpose, to know exactly what you want. But some of the most important things in your life may not become clear until after they happen. You may not understand today why you had to leave, why you failed, why something didn't work, why the person you thought you would become disappeared somewhere along the way. And perhaps you are not supposed to understand all of it yet. Maybe clarity does not always come before the journey. Sometimes it comes because of the journey. You walk, you make mistakes, you learn, you change, and one day you look back and realize that the person who felt completely lost was slowly becoming someone new. Not because they had a perfect plan, but because they kept going. Maybe your entire life feels uncertain right now. Maybe you are waiting for a sign, a perfect opportunity, a moment when everything finally becomes clear. But you don't need to solve your entire life tonight. You don't need to know where you will be in 10 years. You don't even need to know exactly who you are going to become. You only need to be honest about the next step. What is one thing you already know? Maybe you know that something needs to change. Maybe you know that a certain path is making you unhappy. Maybe you know that you have been living according to someone else's expectations. That knowledge is already something. You don't need a complete map to take the next step, and perhaps no one ever really receives one. So if you have been looking at your life and wondering if you missed your chance, if you feel like everyone else has moved forward while you somehow remained behind, If you are embarrassed by how little you think you have accomplished, take a moment. Look at the life you are comparing yourself to, and then ask yourself something. Was I ever actually supposed to become them? Because maybe the answer is no. Maybe you were never late. Maybe you were never behind. Maybe you were simply trying to measure a journey that could only ever be understood from the inside. Your life does not have to look impressive from far away to have meaning. You do not need to reach someone else's destination. You do not need to understand every chapter before you are allowed to continue reading. And you do not need to punish yourself for taking longer to become who you are. There is still time, not because someone can promise you that everything will work out exactly as you hope, but because your story is not finished simply because you don't understand it yet. So stop asking whether you are ahead or behind. That question was never helping you. Instead, ask, what is the next honest step I can take? And then take it, slowly if you need to, afraid if you have to, without knowing exactly where it will lead. Because perhaps the truth is not that you are behind. Perhaps there was never a race. And perhaps, for the first time in a long time, you are finally free to walk your own path. You are not behind in life. You are still becoming.